The marble floors of Rome's grandest halls gleamed under the sunlight, but their shine could not hide the shadows of fear and despair. Behind every ceremonial robe and every polished spear, a young girl's life was quietly being rewritten. 12, 13 years old, barely more than a child. She was handed over to a man decades older, her voice drowned in the chants of celebration. What seemed like a festive union was in truth a ritual of ownership, sanctioned by law and applauded by society. In that fleeting moment, innocence was traded for obedience, and the dreams of childhood were buried beneath the weight of duty. This is the story of those girls, of a culture that treated hearts as property, and of a legacy that echoes through centuries. What happens when the world decides a girl is not hers to live, but another's to command? Watch all the way to the end. There's so much valuable info waiting for you. Don't forget to subscribe, tap like, and share this video. Every bit of support helps our channel grow and inspires us to make even better videos for you. In the heart of Rome, the city's streets were alive with sounds of life. Merchants calling out their goods, children running barefoot over cobblestones, and the distant roar of chariots racing down the forum. But behind the walls of the grandest homes, a different kind of noise filled the air, whispers, sighs, and the quiet sobs of girls who did not yet understand the life that awaited them. For a Roman father, a daughter was a treasure, yes, but also a responsibility. She was to bring honor to the family name, to form alliances, and to secure wealth. Her dreams, her desires, her very childhood mattered far less than the arrangement her father chose for her. At the age of 12 or 13, she would be handed over to a man often twice or three times her age, a stranger who would one day call her wife. The thought of love rarely crossed anyone's mind. Marriage was a contract, a transaction, a ritualized exchange of control. Livia was one such girl. Her hair still fell in soft waves around her face. Her hands were small and uncalloused, and her laughter had once been bright and free. But her father had other plans. He had promised her to Marcus, a man nearly 30 years her senior, a senator with eyes as cold as the marble columns lining his villa. The date was set. The ceremony, meticulously planned, would follow all the customs. The Asta Calabaris, the mock abduction, the domum deductio. Each step had a meaning, each gesture a reminder of the girl's new position in the world. No longer a daughter, no longer a child, but property in the eyes of society. The night before her wedding, Livia sat alone in her chamber, the torchlight flickering against the walls. She traced the carvings on the wooden bed, trying to remember the warmth of her mother's embrace and the stories she once told her. But even in those moments, she knew that her life was about to change forever. Tomorrow, she would step into a world where her voice did not matter, where consent was a concept foreign to those around her. Her heart thudded in her chest, not with excitement, but with a quiet, growing fear. And yet, no one asked her what she wanted. No one cared to hear her whispers or her tears. The city would celebrate her marriage as a triumph. Her father would boast of the alliance, and Marcus would prepare to claim his new wife. History would remember the ceremony as elegant, perhaps even romantic. But for Livia, it was the beginning of a lifetime of survival, in a society that valued her only as a tool to be traded. The question lingered in her mind as sleep eluded her. How does one fight for freedom in a world that believes she belongs to another from birth? Dawn broke over Rome like a pale warning. The streets glimmered with dew, but inside Livia's home, the air was heavy with preparation. Servants scurried to lay out her tunic, the folds crisp and white, embroidered with gold to display her family's wealth. Jewelry clinked softly as they fastened bracelets around her small wrists, earrings dangling near her chin. She did not resist. Resistance would only bring anger, confusion, or punishment. She had learned early that silence was safer than protest. The ceremony would be the centerpiece of her life, a life she did not choose. Rome celebrated these rituals as the pinnacle of tradition, a public declaration that the transfer of a girl from father to husband was not just legal, but sacred. The first act of the wedding was the asta calabaris, the ceremonial spear. It was not just decoration. It symbolized the husband's authority over his bride, a sharp reminder that she would live under his control. As Livia walked behind her father, she could feel the weight of every gaze upon her, the whispers of onlookers who thought they were witnessing beauty and honor. In reality, they were witnessing a silent surrender. Then came the mock abduction, known as domum deductio. Actors and attendants staged the capture, as if Livia were taken against her will, even though everyone knew she had no choice at all. The crowd cheered, fathers and husbands smiled, and Livia's stomach twisted with dread. She understood that this ritual, though meant to amuse the spectators, was a cruel lesson in obedience. From that moment, her body, her life, her decisions, all were no longer hers. The final act, the public consummation, waited in the shadows, a part of tradition that made the bravest women tremble. Though laws today would consider it unthinkable, in Rome it was celebrated. A young girl, barely stepping into adolescence, was expected to submit, and society lauded the man for taking what was his by custom. Livia's mind raced. She had been taught to smile, to bow her head, to follow the rules. But in the quiet corners of her heart, fear gnawed at her like a relentless animal. As she was led to Marcus, the man she was promised, she noticed the cold precision in his eyes. Not cruelty exactly, but a detached expectation. He was not thinking of her as a person, as a child, as someone with a heartbeat full of dreams. He saw her as a part of a transaction, a link in the chain of alliances and social climbing. And yet, despite the terror, a flicker of rebellion stirred inside her. In a society where girls were meant to be silent, even the smallest thought of defiance felt dangerous, but exhilarating. Could she survive this world without losing herself entirely? Could a child, treated as property, ever find a way to whisper back at the thunderous voice of tradition? The ceremony continued, the marble halls echoing with chants and laughter. And for Livia, every step, every bow, every forced smile carved her future in stone. Yet somewhere deep inside, she clung to the tiny ember of hope that one day, perhaps, she could find freedom in a world built to deny it. Before the marble halls and ceremonial spears, Livia had a life that almost resembled childhood. She remembered afternoons spent running through the gardens, the scent of roses heavy in the air, and her laughter echoing across the villa. Her mother had once told her stories of goddesses and heroes, tales filled with courage, cleverness, and love. Livia had imagined herself as one of them, strong, free, untouchable. But that life was fragile as the porcelain dolls lined up in her room. From the moment she could walk, she had been trained for a single purpose: to grow up, obey, and please. Her father watched her like a hawk, teaching her not how to read poetry or dream wildly, but how to sit gracefully, speak politely, and behave in ways that would make her suitable for a wealthy husband. She learned to smile when she did not feel like smiling, to nod when she wanted to shake her head, to silence every thought that might question authority. At 12, she was no longer just Livia. She was a vessel for alliances. Her education shifted from games and songs to etiquette and rituals. Tutors drilled her on how to serve, how to honor, how to exist within the boundaries set by men far older than she was. Friends were few, and laughter became a careful whisper behind closed doors. Every lesson, every practice, was another brick in the cage that would soon close around her. And yet, even in her confined world, she felt the spark of injustice. Watching older women move through life with resigned obedience, she understood that this was not the natural order of things. It was a constructed system designed to strip girls of choice. But how could a child fight a society so vast, so celebrated, and so legally protected? Her thoughts were dangerous. In Rome, curiosity and disobedience were punishable by scorn or worse. The servants tried to soften her days, offering small comforts: a sweet fig, a whispered story, a hand squeezed in reassurance. But Livia knew that tomorrow, none of these small joys would protect her from the reality of her arranged marriage. The thought of Marcus, of the public rituals, of losing her childhood completely, gnawed at her mind. Every night, she cried silently, her pillow damp, her heart heavy. Her mother, herself a prisoner of a similar fate years ago, offered what advice she could: obey, survive, and find your strength quietly. The world may claim your body, but it cannot steal your mind if you guard it. Livia clung to those words. They were a fragile lifeline, a tiny promise that perhaps, even in the tightest chains, she could preserve something of herself. By the time the wedding day arrived, Livia was no longer just a girl on the brink of adolescence. She was a young woman molded by fear, obedience, and lessons of survival. Her laughter had faded, replaced by a mask carefully constructed to hide panic. And yet, deep inside, the ember of rebellion burned faintly, whispering that her story might not end in silence. The morning sun spilled into the villa, turning the marble floors to gold, but its warmth did nothing to ease Livia's trembling. Today was the day her life would change forever. Today, the world would celebrate her as a bride, but to Livia, it felt more like a public trial, a parade of power and ownership she had no say in. Her tunic, carefully embroidered in red and gold, felt heavy on her small shoulders. Each stitch was a reminder of her family's wealth, of the alliances forged at the expense of her freedom. Servants moved quickly, whispering instructions she could barely hear over the pounding of her heart. She brushed her hair, tied it neatly, and tried to force a calm expression. The mirror reflected a girl she barely recognized, pale, wide-eyed, and terrified. The procession to the ceremony began. Livia walked behind her father, feeling every pair of eyes fix upon her. The streets of Rome were lined with citizens eager to witness the spectacle. Merchants paused, children gawked, and elders nodded approvingly. They did not see her fear. They did not see her panic. All they saw was a girl fulfilling her duty, the living embodiment of tradition. The Asta Calabaris was presented, the ceremonial spear gleaming in the morning sun. Marcus took it in his hands with a sense of entitlement, his gaze cold and unreadable. Livia understood the symbolism. This was not just a wedding. It was a declaration of dominance, a ritualized assertion that she belonged to him now, body and mind. Then came the mock abduction, a staged event designed to entertain the spectators. Actors pretended to snatch her, to drag her away, while the crowd cheered. Livia felt a hollow pit in her stomach. There was no acting here. In truth, she was being taken. She realized that all her training, all her preparation, had led to this precise moment, a world that applauded the loss of her autonomy. Marcus approached, his expression unreadable. He extended his hand, and she took it, not out of choice but necessity. The steps to his home were heavy with history, law, and expectation. Each footfall echoed like a drumbeat, a reminder that she was no longer her own. That night, as the rituals continued behind closed doors, Livia lay awake, staring at the cold ceiling. Her body had obeyed, her duty had been performed, but her mind refused to submit. She understood for the first time that marriage in Rome was not about love. It was about control, property, and survival. Somewhere deep inside, a tiny flame of defiance remained. No one could see it. No one could touch it. And as she closed her eyes, clutching the memory of her lost childhood, she vowed silently. She would not disappear entirely. In a world built to crush her, she would find a way to endure and perhaps to fight back. The villa was silent, yet it felt heavier than any city street. Livia stepped across the threshold, no longer a daughter, but a wife, though in truth she felt little like either. The walls were lined with tapestries and statues, grand reminders of wealth and power, but to her, they were walls of a cage. Each echoing footstep through the halls reminded her that she was no longer free. Marcus moved through the home with the ease of one who belonged, taking possession of spaces and people alike. He spoke little to her, offering commands rather than conversation. Every word, every glance, reinforced the reality that Livia was expected to obey without question. She followed the rules meticulously, fearing punishment, public shame, or worse. In the eyes of the household, resistance was a crime as grave as theft or betrayal. Livia's days blurred together. Servants delivered meals she did not truly taste. Her tutors returned to instruct her in the arts of etiquette and decorum, and the outside world became a distant, unreachable memory. Occasionally, she would hear the laughter of other young girls on the streets of Rome and feel a stab of longing. That could have been her running, laughing, living. But now, those sounds were reminders of everything stolen from her. The isolation was crushing. Friends had been left behind. Family visits were formal and brief. Conversations with Marcus were tense, forced, and draining. He was not cruel, not intentionally, but he was part of a system that treated her as property. Livia learned quickly that questioning, arguing, or showing fear were dangerous. Compliance was the only survival tactic. Yet, even in the shadows of the grand villa, her mind remained her own. She began to observe the patterns around her. How women of her age were treated, how servants whispered in corners, how power dictated the flow of every life within the walls. Each observation fueled a quiet anger, a sense that the world she lived in was unjust and cruel. And slowly, she began to imagine a life beyond obedience. She found small ways to assert herself. A question asked softly, a hand moved to adjust a piece of jewelry on her terms. A glance held just a moment longer than expected. These small acts of defiance were invisible to the eyes of others but monumental to her. They reminded her that she was still alive, still thinking, still capable of subtle resistance. Livia began to understand a truth that would guide her in the years to come. While her body could be claimed, her mind and spirit remained untouchable. And in a society designed to silence girls, the quietest voice could still echo powerfully if nurtured with courage, patience, and intelligence. She would survive, and someday, perhaps, she would turn that survival into freedom. Years passed, and Livia's body grew older, but her mind remained sharp, alive, and unbroken. The villa, once suffocating and cold, became a stage for her quiet resilience. She had learned the rhythms of her captivity, understood the unspoken rules, and discovered ways to bend them without breaking. Every small victory, a word spoken on her terms, a choice made quietly, a corner of freedom carved out in the margins of her life, was a spark. And those sparks began to form a fire within her. Marcus remained distant, unchanging in his expectations. To the outside world, Livia was the obedient wife, the symbol of family honor and societal perfection. But in the privacy of her mind, she was free. She read, she thought, she planned, and she observed. She understood the power structures that had stolen her childhood, and she began to see the patterns that bound every woman around her. Knowledge, she realized, was the only true weapon she had. Livia's memories of her youth, once bright and carefree, had been tainted by fear and loss, but she held on to them, to the laughter, the games, the stories of goddesses and heroes. They became her armor against despair. She imagined the faces of other girls, still living under the same chains, and her heart ached. But it also inspired her. She would live, yes, but she would also remember, and in remembering, she preserved their truths as well as her own. Over time, she found small ways to help others quietly. Servants and younger girls in the household began to notice her subtle acts of guidance, the small lessons she imparted in courage, in cleverness, in survival. Livia became a silent teacher, a presence that offered strength without openly defying the structures that surrounded her. In this, she discovered purpose, a way to fight without confrontation, to resist without noise, and to exist on her own terms within a system designed to crush her. Though she had been robbed of childhood, choice, and love in the traditional sense, Livia came to understand a deeper freedom, the freedom of mind, spirit, and conscience. She had endured the horrors of tradition, survived the rituals designed to control her, and emerged not as a victim, but as a witness, a thinker, and a quiet force of resilience. And in the silence of her chamber at night, as the torches flickered and shadows danced along the walls, she allowed herself to imagine something impossible yet beautiful. A world where girls like her would no longer be treated as property, where childhood was sacred, and where freedom was not a whisper in the dark, but a right openly celebrated. Livia closed her eyes, and in that moment, she knew, even when the world demands obedience, the fire within could never be extinguished.